September always had the same smell in the dorms: fresh notebooks, instant coffee, and nervous sweat. The new year meant new faces, wide-eyed first years dragging suitcases and dreams through hallways that already felt too narrow. The dorm wasn't large, but it was alive. Corridors buzzed with the restless energy of students desperate to impress or to hide. Doors were left ajar, leaking bursts of laughter, or slammed shut, holding in silence that already smelled of failure. The walls, painted too many times, held their scars anyway: scratches from furniture, carved initials that no one could quite date, graffiti scratched out but never forgotten. Everyone knew the cemetery stood just beyond the eastern fence. You could see its cracked walls from the last row of windows, white plaster peeled back to bare stone, cypresses leaning like they had been watching for centuries. By day, students joked about it, pointing from the classrooms. By night, no one looked too long. Sam noticed it on his first morning. He didn't joke, he just stared, jaw set, pretending he wasn't curious. By the fourth night, no one was sleeping early. The courtyard filled with voices, shadows under the yellow lamps, and the weight of unspoken rules. That was when the seniors called for silence. There were 6 of them, third years who had once stood in the same place, now leaning against the cracked fountain like kings of a kingdom too small. One of them, Adam, spoke first. He didn't need to shout. His voice was low, and that was enough. "You've seen it," he said, pointing toward the eastern fence. "The cemetery. It's been here longer than any of us, longer than this dorm, longer than your families." Laughter rippled through the older students, but his face stayed serious. "It has a place in who we are. Every year the new ones walk its paths, just one night, dusk to dawn, no excuses." The juniors shifted uneasily. Some tried to smile, others kept their eyes on the ground. Everyone knew it was hazing, but no one dared call it that. Here, hazing had a different name: tradition. Elias grinned and added, "Most don't last an hour. That's fine. But hear this. Stay on the paths. Don't step over the graves. Don't touch what isn't yours. The dead don't like being disturbed." Some chuckled nervously, but Sam caught the way a few seniors avoided looking at the fence. Sam stood at the back of the group, jaw tight. He wasn't the type to laugh nervously, wasn't the type to keep his eyes down. He had arrived here with a suitcase that felt heavier than it was, packed with expectations he hadn't asked for. His father called this place a fresh start. Sam knew better. Fresh starts weren't gifts. You had to wrestle them out of people's doubt. He wasn't the top of his class, not the golden boy his parents wanted him to be. He had been reckless more than once, hiding behind arrogance when he should have been careful, pushing jokes until they cut too deep, burning trust he didn't know how to rebuild. That recklessness hadn't left him. It had followed him here, in every choice he made too quickly. What Sam feared most wasn't failure. It was invisibility. To disappear into the crowd, to be another name on a list, to never matter. That fear pushed him forward more than ambition ever could. Adam's voice cut through the silence. "Who's volunteering?" No one moved at first. First years avoided each other's eyes, unwilling to be the first to speak, unwilling to reveal themselves too soon. The silence dragged, heavy and suffocating. Then Sam stepped forward, not because he wasn't afraid, but because fear of being forgotten was worse. A moment later, another boy followed, pulled more by the crowd's eyes than his own courage. The seniors smiled, satisfied. They led the pair to the gate, its iron bars rusted and bent, its hinges moaning as if reluctant to open. Adam handed each a flashlight that barely worked, its beams flickering like dying candles. "Until dawn," he said simply. Laughter erupted behind them as they stepped inside. But it wasn't mocking, it was hungry. They wanted a show, and Sam was determined to give them one. The cemetery wasn't just about lasting until dawn. That would have been too easy. The seniors had rules: stick to the main path, touch nothing, disturb nothing. But they'd also left a challenge. Each first year had to bring back something from inside. An old stone, a dead flower, proof they hadn't just stood at the gate. That was the game, and Sam was never one to play by the rules. The gate shut behind them with a metallic groan, and the courtyard voices dulled, leaving only the shrill buzz of insects and the rasp of their own breath. The flashlight sputtered, beams cutting thin slices through the fog that clung low to the ground. Dan stuck close, his face pale in the weak light. "We should just grab a rock from the path and wait it out," he whispered. Sam smirked. And hand them a pebble? Please. They'll eat us alive if we come back with that. The graves began almost immediately. Slabs of stone cracked and leaning, some nameless, others carved with dates too worn to read. Sam's steps grew bolder the deeper they went. He brushed his hand across a crooked cross, kicked a loose tile, and let his laughter carry across the rows of the dead. Dan hissed, "Stop it." "What? They're dead." But the way the wind shifted said otherwise. At the base of a leaning tomb, he yanked a brittle flower, twirled it once, then tossed it carelessly to the ground. "See? Nothing." Dan bent quickly and picked it up, clutching it like it might protect him. His voice was low. "It's enough. We'll show them this, and they'll leave us alone." Sam shook his head, grinned sharp in the pale light. "That's a souvenir for cowards. I want something that proves I wasn't just here. I wasn't afraid." The silence that followed wasn't the silence of night. It was heavier. Watching. Sam shoved his hands into his pockets, pretending not to notice. He stepped over a sunken patch of soil, boot scuffing against a headstone that tilted under his weight. The sound was sharp, final, like a door slamming shut. Dan's voice cracked. "Don't. I'm serious." Sam ignored him, kicking at the dirt until a chipped fragment of stone came loose. He bent, picked it up, and held it high like a prize. "There. Now this they'll remember." And that was when he heard it, a rattle, soft, metallic, the slow drag of a chain across stone. Dan froze, flashlight trembling in his hand. His lips formed a word, but no sound came out. Sam's smirk faltered, just slightly. The rattle came again, closer. One link at a time. The rattle came again. Louder. A drag and a clink, like iron pulled across stone. Sam tightened his grip on the fragment of tombstone, his breath quickening in spite of himself. Dan's flashlight beam jittered over the crooked rows of graves, catching only broken crosses, sunken mounds, and the brittle white of old marble. Nothing moved. "Let's go," Dan whispered, clutching the flower like a talisman. His voice was a thread about to snap. But Sam stepped forward, forcing his boots to sound steady. "It's nothing. The wind. Or a dog." He didn't believe it even as he said it. The chain rattled again, longer this time. Not a dog. Not wind. The sound rolled through the graves like something that had been here forever. Dan's beam caught something between the cypresses. Not movement, absence. A patch of dark deeper than the night around it. His breath caught, and before he could speak, Sam's flashlight flickered and steadied on the ground ahead. Hoofprints, fresh, pressed deep into the damp soil between the tombs. Dan stumbled back, shaking his head. "We shouldn't be here. We're not supposed to." Sam cut him off with a sharp gesture. He wasn't ready to back down. Not in front of the shadows he imagined laughing from the dorm windows. Not when he had something to prove. He took another step forward. The soil crunched, brittle and dry where it should have been soft. The flashlight beam lifted and froze. At the edge of the path, just beyond reach of the light, something stood. 2 legs, not human, long, sinewed, ending in hooves that gleamed wet against the stone. Above them, the shape of a woman. Hair cascading like a black veil, face turned slightly, eyes hidden in shadow. Chains hung loose from her ankles, the links catching the faintest glint of moonlight. She wasn't moving, but she was there. Dan's flashlight shook violently now, throwing wild shapes across the graves. "Sam," he begged, voice breaking. Sam swallowed hard, his bravado cracking. For the first time that night, he said nothing. The chains rattled once more. This time not dragging, tugged, like an invitation. The chains rattled once more, closer now, heavy, purposeful. Sam stood rooted, staring at the figure half shrouded in fog, caught between fear and something dangerously like fascination. Dan couldn't move at first. His breath came in shallow bursts, his fingers clamped white around the brittle flower. But when the woman shifted, just slightly, the hooves scraping stone, his body broke free of its paralysis. "Sam, we need to go." His whisper was sharp, desperate. Sam didn't answer. His flashlight shook in his hand, but his feet edged forward, one step, then another. Dan reached for him, yanking his sleeve. "Please." His voice cracked, raw with terror. Sam pulled free. "You can leave then," he muttered, though his voice had none of its usual bite. It was hollow. A bluff. He didn't believe himself. Dan's eyes brimmed with tears. He didn't argue. He turned and ran, through the crooked graves, past the tilting crosses, lungs burning as he stumbled toward the gate. Behind him the sound grew, chains dragging, hooves striking stone, but not following him. Not yet. He didn't look back. He couldn't. By the time he burst through the gate, chest heaving, the courtyard was empty. The seniors had gone inside. No one had waited for proof. Dan collapsed against the fountain, shaking, clutching the dead flower as if it were life itself. He wanted to scream, to call for help, to force someone to believe him. But the silence of the dorm pressed in, heavy and unbroken. Somewhere beyond the wall, the chains rattled again, and Sam's voice, no, not his voice, but something shaped like it, echoed faintly through the fog. Dan stumbled back into the courtyard before midnight, face pale, knuckles white around the brittle flower. The seniors were waiting inside, exactly as if they knew. Elias opened the door with a look that wasn't surprise, wasn't pity, just a quiet nod. No mocking, no questions. "You're done," he said simply, and Dan sank down on the nearest bench, trembling. No one asked about Sam, not yet. The hours dragged. The lamps outside flickered, the dorm hushed into uneasy silence. Some pretended to sleep, but no one really did. They all waited. And then, just at the crack of dawn, the gate creaked again. Sam walked through. His grin was wide, too wide, the kind of grin that didn't quite reach the eyes. Mud streaked his jeans, and one shoe was scuffed like he'd been dragged, but he stood tall, shoulders squared like he had won. He held out a fragment of stone, jagged and cracked, as proof. "Until dawn," he said, echoing Adam's words. The seniors nodded. They let him pass, but Dan saw more. He saw the way Sam's gaze lingered on the eastern fence too long, how his head tilted slightly, like listening to something no one else could hear. The grin never left, but behind it, his eyes were different, darker, hollowed, as if a shadow had followed him back. Sam stayed. He went to class. He laughed at the courtyard jokes. On the surface, nothing had changed, but at night, when the dorms quieted and the corridors emptied, Dan heard it again, faint, metallic, dragging through stone, chains, always near Sam's door. Sometimes Sam woke in the middle of lectures, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. Sometimes he hummed, low and absent, without knowing. And every time the eastern wind swept in through the windows, he froze, just for a heartbeat, before forcing the grin back onto his face. Dan never told anyone what he had seen. He didn't need to. Because every September, when the new students arrived and the dare was spoken again, Sam was the one who leaned against the fountain with the seniors. He was the one who smiled, who repeated the words Elias once had. Until dawn, no excuses. And somewhere, just beyond the fence, the chains rattled again.